Well, welcome back to phase two, Faith, Hope, and Love. Today we're focusing on the virtue of hope. Dr. Mario Sacasa in our first segment helped us understand some of the psychological aspects of what I've titled the dynamic of hope. The way that we can increase in hope, some of the challenges that are present there. And what we as panelists have done with the help of Dr. Sacasa is we've looked and seen how specifically within our communities can we respond with concrete means by which to really facilitate an authentic healing action that doesn't engender a resentment, that doesn't have somebody saying, yeah, but you're trying to ask me to do something that I kind of know isn't true, etc., but to appeal to those elements that we know are true. Such as what it means to be a human person, that it's the virtues that bind us, and that we have a preferential option. We're called to serve those amongst us that are most needful and most in need of a modeling experience for God's love. One of the elements, we're in phase two now, phase three, not to be confused with COVID, okay? I'm not bringing us back, we're good to go. But in spring of this year, we are transitioning to the concrete steps with the facilitation of Dr. Angel Adams-Parham that we're going to take at the University of Holy Cross to respond to all of these challenges. We're scaling up the Heart and Mind community, right, which is a present modeling community where those that have overcome poverty, as well as those that are kind of new to the university from challenging environments, learn what it is to look up to each other and to be able to serve each other. We're scaling up. We're going to be scaling up to 20 Heart and Mind members of the community, as well as 20 mentors to be able to serve them. And in the spring, we're also going to look at the concrete steps, many of which, as I look at this, Chuck talked about giving an allowance tied, right? An allowance tied to what I call confidence targets. Mario, you didn't start on day one with 26.2 miles, right? As a matter of fact, at the end, you almost didn't end with 26.2 miles.
That's correct.
Confidence targets. We realized on the front end, we were offered the option of just having a direct deposit for the awards that our Heart and Mind students and mentors receive. And the thought I had was, I don't want that. The award is to offset having to get a second part-time job so that our students could go to counseling and tutoring, meet with their mentors, etc. But what I wanted to do was monthly to see them, to spend time with them, and to say, great job, Carla. Here's your award. Right? Mm-hmm. Great job. Here's your award, and to give them that tangible expression. So we're going to continue to tease these out, especially as we bring our communities together and share best practices. Please be aware that you can put comments in the chat section, and our panelists can see those. If we have time, we'll address them. If not, we can address them afterwards. And we're going to be able to talk more about this. Our schedule is our own. We're now beginning at 10:23. So Mario, if about 30 minutes works, and then we'll get a little bit closer to 11 o'clock, and we're going to finish today promptly at 12 o'clock with this first installment as we now get ready for the next installment, which is going to be Father Josh Johnson, who's going to help us to understand how the virtue of love is operative in healing action. I now give the floor to Dr. Sacasa.
Thanks, Dr. Amick. Yeah, we have a doctor, a deacon, and a father leading us in this, so it's easy to get confused about who's who's.
Sounds like a joke.
Yeah, exactly. Bad joke. All right, well, let's pray. Let's bring us back into prayer, and let us together offer the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. So Jesus. Amen. All right. Guys, I greatly appreciate your continued time and attention. It's a sincere honor and pleasure and gift to be here with you. So let's keep talking about hope. What I love about these lectures, and I've given this series a few times, and the first time I gave this series was to a group of permanent deacons in the Diocese of Des Moines, Iowa. This was August of last year. And the deacon afterwards was like, man, I didn't realize we could talk so much about hope. And I was like, yes, we can. because hope is so misunderstood. It becomes this passing thought. It becomes this passing thought, this just, I don't know, afterthought idea that we're like, whatever, hope, passive, blah, blah, blah. But then we rob hope of its richness. We rob hope of its gift, of its pertinence, and of its importance in our lives. And so the first lecture, as we've articulated already, speaking about hope in this natural sense of what are the things that I can do to cultivate hope? What are the things that are within my domain in terms of my personal agency, my personal responsibility? How do I make goals bite-sized? How do I surround myself by people who are good models, good influencers for me? How do I imagine a better version of myself and then strive to go to achieve that better version? How do I actually work actively towards becoming those things? So all of that is beautiful, but at the same time, it's also a piece of a much broader conversation when it comes to hope, and that's what we want to be focusing in on today. As I've thought about the goal setting and looking at that as a definition of hope, I think that it's a good definition, but I think it's an incomplete definition. In and of itself, setting goals can be value neutral. Goal setting in and of itself doesn't necessarily have to lead towards virtue. We were speaking about Black Panther here for a few minutes, and I think this is a great example of that. Somebody like Killmonger, the years that it took for him to execute his plan and to become the Black Panther, it was a long, hard, arduous process of him training, learning how to be a killing machine, basically, and to be manipulative and to use people to get to the goal that he wanted. And he achieved his goal. He became the king for a portion of the movie. We would not look at that and extol that as a virtue, as something good, that he didn't become the better version of himself by becoming the king and rising to power through violence and through those means. We would not say that those are the things that happen. So goal setting in and of itself has some limitation. I think also of maybe the high school senior who is, jokingly, we sometimes in the movies they talk about kids wanting to lose their virginity on prom night or something of that nature. Like, I can't go to college, not knowing how to perform well in the bed. Well, okay, so you have this desire, you have the willpower for it, and then now maybe you start talking to your buddies, or you go on YouTube, look at a video, start reading stuff or whatever. Now you have the way power for it, and we're like, okay, well, promiscuity in and of itself isn't really supported, isn't really a healthy behavior. And so we would say that that goal wouldn't inherently lead towards a better version of himself. So while goals are absolutely important and we need them in life, as we've discussed, in and of themselves, they do not fully encompass this concept of hope. And this is where our faith kicks in. This is where our knowledge and understanding of the deeper truths of the person really come into being. Other limitation here is when we speak about death and terminal illness. A dear friend of mine just lost his wife here about a month ago. And being at her funeral, honestly, was one of the most spiritual, uplifting, hopeful experiences that I've ever had in my life. At her funeral, I mean, it was something that was completely remarkable and something that I'm still trying to unpack even to this day. But my point in saying this is that there has to be some greater desire, some deeper hope that anchors our life. And that's the hope that we speak about when we say of a theological virtue. When we speak of the virtues, again, earlier I just quickly ran through them, but in the Catholic sense, there's 7 big virtues. We have 4 that are the cardinal virtues, and those are fortitude, temperance, prudence, and justice. Our capacity to engage in these, to grow in prudence, to grow in temperance, to grow in fortitude, and to act in justice, all of that is within our domain, and certainly we work with grace for that. But then when we speak about the theological virtues of faith, hope, and love that we've been articulating so far, at the end of the day, we call them theological because they are a gift. Theological in the sense that they come from God, that faith has to come from the Lord. I cannot even say the Lord's name without the Holy Spirit inspiring me, as the scripture says. I cannot actualize love unless I have grace residing within me. Why? Because God is love. And when I live in love, I live as God lives. We need God's grace to guide us in faith. We need God's grace to guide us in love. And we need God's grace to guide us in hope. That at the end of the day, our hope rests in the Lord and firmly in the Lord. If we are honest with ourselves and where we find ourselves today and really at any point in our human history, is that we are on a journey and that we are moving we are moving in space and time. And as we are journeying in space and time, we are constantly wrestling with our desires, with our emotions, with our longings, the things that we want to accomplish, the goals that we want to see, the person that I want to become. But if we're honest with ourselves and where we find ourselves right now, and even myself, I have to acknowledge that there's a certain element of who I am right now that is incomplete, that there is a not yetness that exists within me. And this not yetness, this incompleteness, not I won't say vacuum, that's or lacuna, it's too big. This lack that is there is privation of who I am. This desire to be the best version of myself. All of this, right, is the imitation of hope. See, if we're honest and we recognize that, even with all my human agency, even with all my human capacity, even if I strive to set all the goals that I want to do, the best version of myself is waiting for me in heaven. And it is God's grace that guides me. It is God's grace that allows me to contend with my limitations as a person. It is God's grace that makes up for those limitations. As I said earlier, I'm somebody who tends to push the needle on trying to get stuff done. And I constantly am frustrated by my own limitations. And as a choleric, I've had to learn how to be patient with others in their limitations as well. When people don't do the work that I ask them to do as quickly as they need to do it, or when people don't perform to tasks, these are the things that I've learned how to be more merciful with, not just in others, but even within myself, because I'm constantly pushing to try to make up for those things that I feel that I'm lacking inside of me. And so I'm constantly butting up against the limitations of my humanity. And whenever I butt up against the limitations of my humanity, it is in those moments that I cast my hope, my anchor. I place it in something more. I put my anchor in the Lord. I say, God, I am at my wit's end, or even at my exhaustion, at my breaking point. I'm at the moment where I've given everything I can give, and sometimes it still isn't enough. But Jesus, I have hope in you that everything that I've given is in fact enough. And this theme continues to repeat itself in my life. Even just yesterday, I always spend 30 minutes in prayer and with scripture. And yesterday I found myself in Mark's gospel, chapter 3, and the parable of the sower, where he talks about going out and sowing and then going to bed and then waking up the next day and seeing the plants kind of emerging out of the ground, that there's no control over that. That the guy has done what he needs to do. He tilled the soil, he watered it, he planted the seed, he did everything he could do. But at the end of the day, something else has to emerge. Things have to happen outside of my purview, out of my domain of control. Other things have to happen, have to be raised up. And it was a beautiful reminder for me that I'm like, man, okay, as much as I'm hustling with my clients, with this ministry, with the podcast, with these lectures, with the writings, with everything else, I have to recognize that there's other things, other good forces that are happening that are going to bring about some fruit. And that there's certain elements of my life that I just fundamentally have no control over. And so again, it's when we meet these moments, when we meet these limitations, that we are invited by God to cast our hope in him. We are invited by God to be reminded of his supremacy and lordship over our lives. We are invited by God to rest in his goodness and to trust that he genuinely is the author of all of human history. So let me say it this way. Let me bring up my slides here again. In the virtue of hope, more than any other, man understands and affirms that he is a creature, that he has been created by God. This is Joseph Pieper, who is a German philosopher, articulated so beautifully many of these thoughts with regards to the virtues. And this is what he says. He said that in the virtue of hope, again, man understands and affirms that he is a creature and that he is being created by God. Hope is where we say, all right, God, I'm a human person. I've done everything that I could possibly do. And in the end of the day, I give the rest to you. God, I recognize that I don't have eyes on everything that's happening. I do not see time and space as you see. I do not know and organize creation as you have organized it. I jokingly in my last lecture talked about the Job story and how God at the end of the scene comes in and says, were you there when I created the universe, basically? I mean, God's reminding us that here we are. We find ourselves in these points continuously where we recognize that we are not always in control of everything that we want to do. And so we have to have hope, and we have to choose hope and rest our hope in this. Now, I'll say this. The Catechism, when it speaks about hope, beautifully ties hope then to the First Commandment. And what is the First Commandment? Well, let's go back into that. The First Commandment is, if I can pull my slides up, here we go, is this. Right out of Exodus. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a graven image or any likeness or of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that it is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them. It is written in Matthew's gospel, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him alone shall you serve. When I think about the various idols of my life, whether it is success is a big one, man, that I place my hopes so much in my personal accomplishments. And then I become a slave to success in terms of busting my tail and trying to prove myself to others. Sometimes maybe I fall into some personal sin and I expect those things to bring me satisfaction that cannot satisfy the depths of who I am. This is what the Lord is saying. Now, the Lord isn't saying that he can't use natural means to bring about his grace, sacramentally speaking. Sure, yes, in the 7 sacraments, but even in a natural sense. I love nature. I love going out for a good hike. There aren't any mountains in New Orleans. So, we have to drive kind of far away to find some rest. But when I'm able to find rest in God's beauty, I am reminded of how awesome God is to create these majestic mountains. The first time I went to the Rocky Mountains, I was like, I get it. I understand why the Native Americans worship these things, because they are so majestic and so awe-inspiring that you would almost think that they are deities in and of themselves, but they aren't. There's holiness that exists in them for sure, but it is there because God has given us. God has created the world in order to be absolutely spectacular. And so we place our hope in here, hope in the Lord. Here, God, right after the leading of the Israelites out of slavery, out of Egypt, crossing the Red Sea, performing one miracle after another, has proven himself to be a trustworthy and hopeful person. See, in the Old Testament, there's often a conversation about memory. There's a lot of discussion about memory. We recall God, the God of our fathers, the God of our forefathers. Remember God who led you out of the land. There's always this appeal towards memory, appeal towards these great stories, even generations, centuries later. Remember the God who led King David. I mean, constantly these appeals of God's involvement in human history. Well, why? Why is memory so important in the Old Testament? Well, the reason that memory is so important is because it's in these moments that we see God not just reveal his power and his majesty, but God reveal himself for who he is as a loving father who cares for us, who creates us, who desires us, who guides us, who leads us. And then we get into the New Testament and we see in the New Covenant, Jesus as the incarnation himself. And then, yes, in the spes unica, our only hope lies in the cross. Why? Because in the cross of Jesus Christ, do we see God himself take up all of human sin, all of human suffering, and then redeem the heck out of all of it. That's the beauty. That's the beauty. And that's the story that we all have to cling to in ourselves. So memory is important. We have tradition. We have stories that we want to be reminded about how God has intervened, how God has revealed himself, revealed truths. How has God revealed himself in human history so that I can place my hope in an honest relationship with God? So the Catechism continues and says this. It says, in the first commandment embraces faith, hope, and charity. When we say God, we confess a constant, unchangeable being, always the same, faithful and just, without any evil. It follows that we must necessarily accept his words and have complete faith in him and acknowledge his authority. He is almighty, merciful, and infinitely beneficent. Who could not place all hope in him? Who could not love him when contemplating the treasures of goodness and love he has poured out on us? Hence, the formula God employs in Scripture at the beginning and in the end of the commandments is, I am the Lord. I am God. I am God. And I have opened up the possibilities to you. All the goals, all the desires, all the dreams, everything that you long for comes from him, because it's God prompting inside of us a journey, a leading us, a revelation of these truths. See, the beautiful thing about our faith is that, yes, it's corporate. Yes, absolutely, we have tradition. Yes, we have communal worship that we absolutely need. Yes, we have dogma. Yes, we have truths. But even within all those commandments and all those truths, there's a beautiful big sandbox that we have the capacity to reveal God in my own particular way, because I am unique and unrepeatable. And so the way that I experience the Lord is unique. The way I'm able to articulate and to share and to use my gifts and my talents to bring about God's kingdom here on earth is particular to myself, in particular to who I am as a person. But I constantly appeal and place hope in the Lord and listening to the desires of my heart to guide me along the way. What are the hopes? What are the dreams? What are the things that I'm really longing for? You want to know how hopeful you are? How big are your dreams? How big are the goals? What are the things that you're really going after? What are we really trying to achieve on earth? Where are we going? What's our final destination? These big questions are anchored in hope. And Benedict says this then: only when the future is certain, when heaven is as a positive reality, does it become possible to live the present as well. The one who has hope lives differently. When I believe and know that I can achieve heaven because God has opened it up, it makes all the hardships of life possible. This is what we saw. This is what I saw in the funeral of my friend Elise. Throughout the 6 years of her cancer diagnosis, I saw them cling to hope the whole time because they knew that God had a plan. They knew that there was meaning and purpose in the midst of their suffering. And even in her death and in the moment of her death, beautiful stories were emerged. In her funeral, beautiful conversions were happening. God has a plan in all of this. That's in the big picture. In the little picture, if we bring it down a couple notches, when we talked about the boys' hope, and Chuck, when Chuck was sharing about, the differences between having people who are just a few steps ahead and could give that hope and be a witness and be a positive reality of what one is possible living, versus when you don't have those representative models, that changes the way that you interact, because you say, when you see other people who are just a few steps ahead of you, that look like you, that have overcome the things that you've overcome, you're able to say, man, I have hope because that person was able to do it. And while, yes, I still have to be responsible for myself, at least I'm able to have hope and acknowledge the possibility that it is there. So when the future is certain as a positive reality, does it become possible to live the present as well? We can endure all things. We can do all things with grace that sustains us. So Benedict continues in his great encyclical Spe Salvi, Saved in Hope. He says, his kingdom is not an imaginary hereafter, situated in some future that will never arrive. His kingdom is present wherever he is loved and wherever his love reaches us. Thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. That's what we invoke every time that we say the Our Father. We pray for God's grace to come and manifest himself today, here, now, in our present circumstances, over a digital conference. We want God's grace to be with us in everything that we do. His love alone gives us the possibility of soberly persevering day by day without ceasing to be spurred on by hope in a world which by its nature is imperfect. Charles Peggy says it this way. He says, back to this poem, Portal of the Mystery of Hope. Hope is not obvious. Hope does not come on its own. To hope, my child, you would have to be quite fortunate to have received a great grace. It's faith that is easy and not believing that would be impossible. It's charity that is easy and not loving that would be impossible. But it's hoping that is difficult. And the easy thing and the tendency is to despair. And that is the great temptation. When we stack it all up, and we look at the world and we put it into an algorithm and we put the formula and we look at humanity and we say, man, we've done some pretty rotten things to one another. We're pretty capable of doing awful stuff to one another. So why then is it even in the midst of that? Because that's a reality. We cannot excuse sin. We cannot excuse evil and its real effects on people and the real prices that people have to pay because of human sin. We have to really genuinely contend with the evils of other individuals. But even in the midst of that, the research still shows that the vast majority of us are optimistic. We tend towards optimism. Why? Why do we genuinely believe that things can be better? Are we dumb? Are we just ignorant? Or is there something inside of us that says that there's still, even despite all the suffering, even despite COVID and hurricanes and racism and violence and murder and all the evil things that we could talk about, is there something more profound to what it means to be a person? Is there a grace that can guide us to overcome all of this? His love alone gives us the possibility of soberly persevering day by day, without ceasing to be spurred on by hope in a world which by its nature is imperfect. As a therapist, one of the occupational hazards is burnout. And I'll say over the last few years that I personally have been experiencing that for the first time in my life. And it's been a challenge. I'm not going to lie. And at times the burnout, and the reason it's an occupational hazard is because day in and day out, what do? I listen to people's brokenness. I listen to people's stories. I listen to people's difficulties and challenges. And you can get inside your head and you can start thinking that this is it. This is all it is. This is as good as it's going to get, because it's a myopic view of human nature. I know when couples come to me that I'm only seeing the worst of them. I know intellectually, at least in my imagination, I know that it's just 1 hour a week and that there's other happy moments that they have, but I know that I'm seeing the brunt of the difficulties that are there. But sometimes it becomes too difficult because I'm human. I care for my clients. I love them. I have empathy and compassion for them. But man, it does get taxing, and then the despair can kick in. And I've seen and worked in institutions and organizations that, I wish I could say were the most charitable, but weren't. And when you start seeing sin happening at a systemic, at a corporate level, at a level of culture within organizations, it becomes quite despairing to be able to think that you have any say in being able to make some change. And so the narrative starts picking up. This is it. Like, this is as good as it's going to get. At least you tried. At least you did the best you could. It didn't really matter. It didn't really do anything in the end. And all of that negative thinking, it has led me towards moments of depression and moments where I've had to fight against the negativity that is very real, when all the evidence is stacking up to saying despair is the most logical thing that you can choose, to still in the end anchor my experience into something more. And even in my moments of depression, and as low as they can get at times, or anxiety and the sleepless nights and the difficulties that emerge in all of that, they're still inside of me, and it's only spiritual. I can only speak of it as being something more profound than just my psychology, is to say that I do believe in hope. And I do believe that what I'm going through will pass, that I do believe that God will use everything in my experience for his goodness, that no stone will be unturned in my life, that every riddle will be answered, every question I have will be answered, that there is genuine purpose and meaning, and I have to be able to cling to these truths and believe in his providence and believe in his goodness and continue to choose hope even when despair seems to be the most logical and reasonable answer to come to. So St. Augustine says this, though. He says, if we choose despair, we kill the soul. Two enemies of the soul here are despair and false hope. Well, we've been speaking about despair a little bit, but I just kind of want to give some concept to it. When we choose despair, what we are saying is that incompleteness, that feeling that I talked about earlier, this not yetness, is done. The period is at the end of the sentence. The paragraph has been written. The book is done. We close it, and that's it. There's no more becoming when you choose despair. There's no more. It's it. It's done. And what has been left is this fixated moment, this fixated reality that all there is this nonsense and this awfulness that's there. So when we choose despair, though, it is a sin against hope, because it is saying then that God's goodness won't permeate to me, that there is this shelter, there is this cloud that is going to prevent me from receiving that grace and that goodness, and all I can do is just live within the despair and the reality of my life. So again, I'm not saying that it's not real, it's not honest, it's having doubt, of course, is part of the journey. But despair makes it difficult to engage. Despair makes it difficult even to engage in good things. A couple summers ago, it was that trip we went to the Rocky Mountains. Actually, I was having a particularly difficult year, and we knew we needed. I finished my doctorate. The stress of writing the doctorate, for everybody else on the call who has a PhD knows that the dissertation year or years can be really taxing on one. In addition to everything that was happening with work and different challenges that were present there, I knew we needed a big vacation. So we went to the Rocky Mountains. Huge vacation. I mean, it's a 20-hour drive from New Orleans, but man, it was worth every minute of it. On the way back, usually every summer, I try to put together like a video of the vacation. I take all the pictures and I put some music to them and do all of that. But that particular summer, I had a hard time putting the video together because what the despair was preventing me from even acknowledging the good things. Or sometimes, like when you have a particular hard moment and you look at pictures of yourself from those moments, you don't want to see it because it just evokes into your memory all the difficulties and the hardships that are there. That's what we're speaking about. Being able to then see and acknowledge that that difficulty is real, yes, and that we shouldn't be poking at that and keep reminding ourselves of it, for sure, but that we need to be honest and active in fighting and praying against despair and saying that cynicism is not the final answer. Killmonger was wrong in the end. As reasonable as his requests were, he was wrong. He was wrong in the end. And we know this to be true. The other side then, if we talk about two errors in hope, one is despair. And the other, St. Augustine, he beautifully talks about a false hope. When we're too casual with our desire or expectations, when we maybe have success too early in life and we think that, well, look how good I am, not taking into account all the other factors that played a role into that. This can lead to laziness. Presumption is a sin against hope also because it doesn't take into account reality. We don't need to work anymore, right? Success is given to me no matter what. And the Catechism warns against this when it talks about forgiveness without conversion or glory without merit. These things are dangerous to the soul. It's a slippery slope towards losing faith because we always must be humble before the Lord. Pieper, when he's talking about hope as a theological virtue, says the natural virtues that need to be cultivated when we speak about hope is magnanimity and humility, that we have to be bold in our desires, bold in our requests, but humble in the fact that it's only God and God alone who can guide us towards it. So magnanimity and humility is what leads us against this, is what anchors us against this. And this is what anchors us against, or protects us rather, against false hope as well. If it's just my doing or my capacity or my ability to save myself, well, we are in for a pickle, are we not? And it's that false hope that I think we have to contend ourselves, particularly when we think about, culturally speaking, honestly, like this techno, Pelagianism, that we think that technology and science is going to be the thing that will save us. It's done great things. It's made great advances. We live in a better place, of course. We absolutely are grateful for the impact and the effects the humans have made in these disciplines. But in and of themselves, science will not save us. Jesus Christ saves us. Again, spes unica, our only hope rests in the Lord. So yes, natural hopes are good. Natural hopes guide us. Natural hopes lead us towards this fuller, deeper hope. And this is what Pieper says. All our natural hopes tend toward fulfillments that are like vague mirrorings and foreshadowings, like unconscious preparations for eternal life. Every time a desire is fulfilled, that's God smiling on us and reminding us that, hey, this is good, but I got more. Every time that we achieve a goal, good, deep, meaningful goals that we cry our eyes out when we achieve them, We can't put a tent there. We can't do as Peter wanted to do a transfiguration, say, it's good. We're going to stick a tent here. We're going to make this. We're going to stake this claim. We're going to make this holy. No, we keep going. We keep moving forward. And God says, yeah, that was good. It was good you got that glimpse. You're going to need that glimpse. But let's keep going. Let's keep seeing how far we can go in this project of making you the best version of yourself. Every one of our desires are good, even our unfulfilled desires. This is what Martin Luther King spoke about in his sermon, Unfulfilled Dreams, that even the desires that we have in our hearts that are left unfulfilled in and of themselves are still good that they were there. You know, I'm 40. I contend with my limitations. There's so much more that I thought I would have done by this point. And I recognize that I'm not going to do everything that I want to do. And I have to embrace the limitations and the smallness of my life and recognize that even the little things that I've done have had merit. They have meant something. They have been enough because God has seen it. And God will use all these different seeds, use all the different things that I've done, and to be able to bring about some grace, some goodness in ways that I honestly have no idea how he's going to do it. So we bring this back then to this passage here. Therefore, since we have been justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. You think about peace. Rest in peace is what we put on the tombstones of people. Why? Why? Because we recognize the hardships of life. We recognize the difficulties there. We recognize the tendency to despair. We recognize the errors in our judgments and placing hope in false things and lesser things. And God knows that. But as we journey through this, as we pray, as we grow in the spiritual life, as we graft ourselves to the tree of life that is Jesus himself, we grow in having peace with God. Peace, assimilation, healing, reconciliation, all these things we've spoken about. Understanding that everything in my life has had a plan. Every hardship, there's been purpose in. God, I have peace in every sin that I have committed, in every error that I've done, because I'm trying to move forward, because I believe that I've been justified by you. I believe that you have grace that will guide, that will overcome every one of my mistakes, that I can learn from everything that I've done, that I cannot erase the past, but that I can move forward. So we have peace with God through Jesus Christ, through whom we have gained access to this grace in which we stand. How have we gained access to the grace? Come on, Holy Cross, spes unica. That's it. In the Holy Cross, that's how we've gained access to this grace. And therefore, we boast in the hope of the glory of God. And not only that, but we boast of our afflictions. Why? Because God says that we can overcome everything. He can use everything for his goodness, knowing that this affliction produces endurance, and that this endurance proven character, and proven character hope, and hope does not disappoint, because the love of God has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit that has been given to us. Brothers and sisters, open our hearts to the Lord. Open our hearts to him. Let us desire him as we should. Let us put him above everything. Let that be the supreme value in our life upon which we orient everything else. Let that be the supreme goal upon which that we are desiring to achieve in everything that we do. We believe in this hope. We believe in this goodness. We believe in this grace that God desires to give to us. So it is not an easy task that's set before us, for sure. We all have to contend with it in our own ways, in our own sufferings, in our own realities. But we believe, again, that God is bigger than all of this, and not in a cliche, cheap way, but in a truthful, honest, humble way. That God's mercy will guide us in everything that we do. So, amen. Thank you guys so much. I'm going to stop my screen share here and give this back to Dr. Amick.
Good to go. Jordan, are we back? Are we back with the panelists? All right, as our panelists join us now, I'm just going to highlight a few key areas, and thank you for your questions. If we have time, we'll answer one. We have one from a member of our faculty at the University of Holy Cross, so hopefully we have time for that. But as I kind of reflect on some of the key elements that Dr. Sacasa just talked about, the first is, and you mentioned this a few times, it seems like if you want to engender the virtue of hope, do not name your child Killmonger. Is that one of the key takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, it's right there in the name, right? Obviously, it's what he is. He's a monger
Right.
of
It's like
fear
if you name your
and
child
hatred.
so-and-so the apostate, what do you expect, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
All right. So, but one of the elements you really focused on was a radical contingency,
Mm,
right?
mhm,
That on one hand, the psychological approach to hope, involves agency, it involves imagination, it involves the ability to think I can change the future, and yet we come up against this human experience of, but I can't change whether or not my children get sick. I
right.
can't change economic factors. I can't change so many more things than I actually can. And that seemed to be from what you said, really like a profound endorsement of Christian identity, right? So the Catholic Christian identity that we share at the University of Holy Cross, we're one of the things that we're navigating right now, and I love it, is how do we maintain a prophetic witness, a Christian witness in an increasingly pluralistic and secular society? Now, the people that come to UHC realize I'm coming to a Catholic university. I'm purposely choosing that,
Mhm,
and there's a reason for it. But
mhm,
if we have, approximately 60% Roman Catholic, approximately 30% Baptist, especially African American Southern Baptist,
mhm.
and approximately 10% Muslim, as well as others with little religious affiliation, we are navigating how to show God's love to them. And I think in some cases doing great work, in other cases, challenging missteps. Recently, one of the guiding documents we looked at to be able to determine what this looks like, as I was reading through and seeing, I wasn't seeing contingency. I wasn't certainly seeing the exercise of the virtues. And then I realized it was a corporate manifesto. It was how to set up a diversity committee at a secular corporation. And so what you're highlighting is, in light of the fact that God is God and I am not, I think that helps us to plan our work, to make it personal, to say I can't change the world, but I can, through God's grace, change me. And what that requires is an understanding of the God that's particular to where we are. I think that very much comes from the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph, the God who is so humble that he becomes an embryo in the womb of Miriam of Nazareth. And that this gives us the means by which to move forward, and to grow in hope, but also to take a humble, right? To be able to take a humble posture and realize, when I started this work at UHC, I was, the grant request said, to end poverty, to set up this program, to do this and that. And the first step I said was, what are the unique things we can't do and the unique things that we can do, right? What can we do? And so in light of the Catholic Christian identity of where we are, the Christian identity that we share, through the different institutions that we serve, I would like to offer this question to the panel. How in your work have you seen the virtue of hope present, so that not only does it avoid despair, right? Which is really, and as I'm listening, and I don't know if another theologian has come up with this, but I saw despair as an expression of pride, because it's like saying, God, you are not the only thing that can really be an impediment to your grace, to your life given to me, is me,
Mhm,
and somehow I'm more powerful than you, right?
mhm.
So I will not be open to your grace. Somehow I'm more powerful than you. So for our panelists, for Angel first and then Chuck, how have you seen hope destroy despair, but also destroy the flip side? And you didn't use this term, but I think it's appropriate. This false hope, or this presumption that says, I don't need to change. I don't need to change. Angel?
Yeah, I think that's an incredibly important question. And again, Dr. Sakasa, just really, enjoy the depth of the discussion that you're giving us, and hear the theological discussion especially. So I know that many of us, many of those who are listening to us are leaders in some way in the community. And part of what Dr. Sakasa talked about was burnout, and sometimes giving into the despair that doesn't matter what, what I do, it's just not gonna, nothing's gonna happen. So one of the things that came to mind for me in that in particular is the importance of being rooted in a faith community.
Mm-hmm.
That it would be the height of pride to think, I, Angel Param, am going to change the world. I am going to do this. I think that is part of almost how things are presented to us in the secular world. Come to our college, come to our school so we can show you how to change the world. Okay, maybe, but there's a lot within ourselves that we have to get right, that we have to understand of who we are and how God has made us. And also we do need that faith community to stand behind us, to buttress us, to help us and to give hope and to know that we are not the be all and the end all of making this happen, because that is a false pride that leads us up to destruction. The other thing I would say is, again, for me, I spend so much of my time in the world of the academy and within sociology in particular. There is a lot of focus on injustice and inequality and what can be done. And I'm all for it. That's kind of how I'm made to think about those questions. But I have seen over the years a difference between how I approach this and others that I know who are like those on this panel, a very important difference in the way I approach it and sometimes my colleagues will approach it, where I've noticed that for many, and not just colleagues when I was in graduate school, other graduate students, that there was this way of approaching it that was mostly just filled with anger, and kind of this sense of, and there is a room for righteous anger, absolutely. But when you don't have that hope and you don't have what Dr. Sakasa was talking about, that constant remembrance of how God has been with his people and has brought his people through incredible odds. When you don't have that hope, then it's a very, I think it can be a very destructive thing that can tear you apart, because you just see all of this evil and you don't have any hope that anything can really be done about it. So I think it's very important too, when we're working with our students, that to instill that sense of hope, and particularly through the scriptures, what has God shown us about who he is? And then when I'm thinking in particular about an African-American community and working with my African-American students, how has God been with us as African-Americans, as a people, through incredibly difficult odds that were before us? And part of what you were saying earlier too, Todd, is that we have an increasingly secular culture. And so part of what I've seen, when I've been in some of the little Bible lessons that we have in our curriculum with the kids, is they don't know the basic Bible stories. Like we start to talk about Adam and Eve or Noah's Ark, and we kind of just get these blank looks, which is very worrisome to me. So I think, and I see that in my college students as well. Oh, well, the story of, we're reading a short story that was very clearly modeled on King Solomon and the two women with the baby. Mm-hmm. And so I said, well, yeah, you know the story, right? Kind of got all these blank looks. And then one young woman kind of hazarded a guess, and she kind of had the hazy outlines of it, but there was just nothing, So like just these basic stories, if you don't have, part of what we've talked about is the importance of story, the importance of memory. You get that by training our young people. And so when our very youngest people, and we work in Nyansa with 5 to 11-year-olds, when they don't know those foundational stories, how can we even begin to cultivate this idea of hope and the promises of God? So we definitely rely a lot on Bible stories, just basic competence. And part of how I talk about this too is that I really believe this is important, even if we were working if our program, our curriculum is being used in a non-Christian context, because so much of our culture and our literature assumes a basic knowledge of the Bible, there's still a reason for people to know those stories.
Mhm.
But all the more so for those of us who are believers and working within the community of believers, when that's not being passed down to young people as a matter of course, that's a real concern.
I think
Yeah.
that's really meaningful, Angel. A neighbor of mine who's an attorney, a very well-known attorney in town, was saying that when he went to Loyola, there were 5 courses that everyone had to take. There were, I think, 3 philosophy and 2 theology, which kind of formed that core and a shared patrimony by which then to approach law, medicine, economics, with law enforcement, whatever area you go into. We presently have 2, which gives us a chance to be able to then root every one of the other majors in this, this Catholic Christian tradition. But I think that's really meaningful. Chuck, good job.
As I was listening to Dr. Casa, we get most of our kids around 12 to 14 years old, and obviously depending on what their exposure to faith has been and church has been, is a pretty wide range. We do require the kids to go to church on Sunday. Obviously, they're all in Catholic schools, and so they began getting introduced to some of Christian teaching and that kind of stuff, and Catholic teaching. However, you take I just use a 14-year-old who really hasn't been raised in the church. She moves into our house. We put her into Dominican, and she starts taking, theology classes at Dominican. And I mean, she, I can remember the first week she came back and she was like this theology stuff is kind of strange. She's like, I don't know anything they talk about, and everybody else seems to know what what they're talking about. And I said, well, that's the unfortunate side of you moving into a school where most of these kids have gone to Catholic school all their lives, so they've had this this continuum of education. And she's like, well, I said, so like, what are your questions? She's like, well, so I guess my first question is like, how do you believe in that stuff? And I said, well, over time, and obviously she knew of God and she knew Jesus and she knew the terms, but knew none of the stories. And so beginning to try to overcome that, not to mention, that's my introduction to them is, look, they're, your faith is typically, you have a faith by birth, you have a kind of a developmental faith that you begin to explore as you mature, and then you have more of a convictional faith as you begin to set your own belief system and how does that tie into faith worship and that kind of stuff. And so I'm like, just know that you're still in the exploration phase, and people start at different levels. But it's and I always try to use people's stories, because like we have a ton of people that help us, from people that drop off meals to us to tutors. There's no shortage of a number of people giving their time and efforts and money to create opportunity and to allow our organization to work. And so there are those examples, and many of them are driven by obviously their faith. Majority of our donors are Catholic, and so I have people examples to use, and and even our staff is that we could probably all be making a lot more money working somewhere else if we really wanted to, but it's because of our belief in giving kids an opportunity and that they do matter and that we want their lives to be better. And that comes from for most of us, from a place of our faith development and faith expression that we do this work. And so, trying to use examples of people which they can relate to. And so for many of our kids, they've received food from food pantries or from, support from churches. And so they've had experiences where these groups have helped. And what I try to utilize, and going kind of back to our Men and Women for Others mantra that we get from the Jesuits, is that how can you now become that helper? How can you now begin to express your value for people, and eventually, your love and desire to follow God's teachings in the work that you do. And it's a little bit easier path, I think, for teenagers to be able to go, even just recently being able to go, and we actually went, because we have limited ability with COVID to get out and do work. One of our grandmothers needed her yard cut and cleaned up and that kind of stuff. So we were able to go, and actually we've begun just helping our own families within the program for right now, because it's a more controlled setting. But everybody has the ability to do that and to make, Miss Nelson's life a little bit better by spending a day helping her clean her yard and straighten out some things and get stuff out of the way. And so, trying to tie that back to faith, and to, for our middle school girls, I always use, it's not okay to be mean, you go to Catholic school, you go to church every Sunday, and then you're like brutally mean to to people in your life. I'm like, can you see where those things don't match up? That if, you're hearing this stuff at church and you're hearing this stuff at school, that should drive you to say, you're supposed to be treating people well. You're supposed to be bettering people's lives, and trying to use those examples. And it's probably our biggest challenge. Not only the secular aspects of society and social media and just being a teenager, just their maturational status. It's our biggest challenge, and it's, for adults, for me, it's very easy to understand these concepts. But to get it down to their level takes a lot of work. And then not just that, but all of our staff come from different upbringings and different faith perspectives. And so when we talk about co-parenting, and for you guys that are parents, to co-parent with another adult raising your own kids, we're trying to co-parent with 4 adults in the house who all grew up in different home environments, who didn't choose to co-parent with the people they live with 8 kids that aren't their own. And so it gets really complicated, and, you run into a lot of challenges. And, but
Chuck, it almost sounds a little bit like a reality TV show in the making.
It's interesting though, because you see these clips, and I'll stop right after this. You see these positive glitches of where the scholars, our students, began kind of explaining to the staff why we do these things and why it's important. And like, we do it because our school teaches it. Like, a lot of our staff didn't go to Catholic schools. So it's nice when you begin to see the kids start to explain to the staff, why are we doing these things, and why do we have to do community service on Saturday? Why do we have to go to church on Sunday, and those things? And so it is planting the seed and cultivating the seed, and it does take time, but you do see, sprouts of your, the fruit of your work periodically. And so
Absolutely. And I think the work you do, the work Angel does, and I pray also the work that we're privileged to be able to do at the University of Holy Cross expresses that as well. I think one element that I really heard coming through everything you were saying, but also what Dr. Sakasa was saying, is that in an increasingly pluralistic and secular world, to have a Christian identity, in our case, a Catholic Christian identity, really is in itself diverse. That the outreach we have is a result of the love that God has shown to us, and the love that we then enter into and model for others. But that it isn't therefore diverse for us to say we're going to be diverse by looking like everybody else, right? That there's a uniqueness, there's something special there. And quite frankly, I'll say that it's a privilege to be able to be in an environment where we can affirm with charity, with prudence, and with love, the fact that God's in love with us and calls us to love others. One of our questions, and I think it's going to be better handled on the back end of the next talk, is what are concrete ways that we can exercise hope in the work that we do? So we'll take a quick break. It's 11:19. We'll begin promptly at 11:24. Dr. Sakasa will talk for about 20 minutes. We'll have about 15 after that, and then we'll have a recap. During this break, if you will access the University of Holy Cross website, go to Healing Action, which is on the banner, and you can RSVP for our next talk, which is going to be on October 23rd. We're also going to be sending you a link to the videos for this talk so that you can share them with your family, your community, and your friends so that we can continue this conversation where we are. We'll see you in about 4.5 minutes. Thanks so much.